Hello, everyone. We're going to quickly talk about the Spanish-American War and its economic impact for the United States. So, as we see right here, this is 1802, nearly 100 years before the Spanish-American War. The Spanish-American War is going to be in 1898. So the areas in orange are going to be what Spain controls. So Spain is going to control in 1802 the Philippines, obviously Spain, a large part of South America, excluding Brazil and a few French territories, Cuba, Florida, parts of America, Mexico, all of Central America, and so on. So Spain was doing really well at the beginning of this century, the 1800s. By the time we get to 1898, they only really have a few places left. They've lost America, as we know, the United States. Mexico has become its own country. Central American states have become their own countries. Most South American states have become their own countries. And they just have a few places left. Let's look at what they have. So they still control the Philippines. They control Cuba. They control Puerto Rico, which is right in here. And they control this little area called Guam. It's a little tiny island. So Spain certainly has lost a lot of power in the 1800s, but they're still considered one of the world's powers during this century. So let's get into the war. So as we remember, the Spanish-American War started because Cuba was decimated. Cubans were decimated by the Spanish, who were trying to stop them from becoming their own country, threw them in concentration camps. The warship Maine, the USS Maine, the United States ship Maine, was blown up on Havana Harbor, and all the journalists and newspapers were saying that Spain did it without any evidence. We called that yellow journalism. So those are our three main reasons why the Spanish-American War started in 1898. And it was what people have called the Splendid Little War because it was a very quick war. Let's look at all the different places it happened because it happened all over the globe. So it's first going to start with the Battle of Manila Bay. Manila is the capital of the Philippines. So the Americans do pretty well. The Spanish are going to have 381 casualties and have 7 of their warships destroyed. The U.S. only has 9 casualties, no warships destroyed. Admiral George Dewey is going to take off from China. Remember, we had dominated China with the open door policy. We literally are able to have our naval ships near that area. So we go from China, which we're dominating, which we used imperialism on, to the Philippines in a surprise attack in May 1st, 1898, which is going to allow the U.S. to take control of the Philippines by August. Our second area is going to take place in Guam, a little island near the Philippines. So from the Philippines, our naval fleet is going to go to Guam, and this is what we call the capture of Guam in June. And it's pretty crazy because pretty much right away, the Spanish are going to surrender. They didn't even really know that the United States was at war with Spain. So they kind of just let America come to its shore and then were very surprised that Americans were armed and trying to get them to surrender. And they did. They didn't even know they were at war. So now we have the Philippines, we have Guam. Let's go to our next area, which is Cuba. This is the main part of the battle, and this is what we call the Battle of San Juan Hill. Probably the most famous battle from the Spanish-American War. So this is where we have kind of a coalition of volunteer cavalry forces led by this man who will become our future president, Theodore Roosevelt, and his volunteer cavalrymen, the men on horseback, are called the Rough Riders. This gains Theodore Roosevelt a lot of attention and eventually allowed for him to become vice president and then president once William McKinley, the president during the Spanish-American War, is assassinated. So if you're confused that we already talked about President Roosevelt, That took place on what was happening at home. So that's going to actually happen in the future from this event. We went back in time when we're looking at international events, which happened during this age of American imperialism. So the Rough Riders are going to be there with Theodore Roosevelt, and these other segregated units that we call the Buffalo Soldiers, who really do a great job in this war and in this battle. And they together, these groups helped defeat the Spanish at this area of Cuba called San Juan Hill. And then, of course, we have Puerto Rico, which is where the Spanish are going to surrender, and the U.S. is also going to take over that area. So now, after just a few weeks of war, Spain is defeated. They've lost most of their remaining territory. So Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines will be ceded or given to the United States as a result of the war. And the U.S. is actually going to purchase the Philippines from them as well. And the U.S. will annex these or add them to their own country. Cuba, America couldn't just go in and take Cuba because they were vying for their independence. They were trying to become independent, and they were having this big revolution. So America arranged for them to become what we call a protectorate, where the U.S. is going to protect them and kind of be in charge of them, but allow them a certain degree of independence. But having a protectorate status really ultimately just means that the U.S. could intervene in Cuba whenever they want to, which is going to make the Cuban people pretty upset, and we're going to have a complicated history with Cuba from this point on, even till today. So, now that we have done this, we have taken down a world power in the world. Spain has been defeated. They were a world power. They've lost most of their territory. All they really have left is Spain at this point, proving they're not a world power. So if we defeated a world power, what do we become? We become a new world power. The Spanish-American War makes America into a world power. We have proved that we could take on a strong nation like Spain, and we have expanded our territory into the Caribbean and into Asia. Now let's talk about the economic impact pretty quickly. So when we acquire these places, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, we can do a few things with them now. So when we talked about using imperialism in other places, dominating other places, there are a few reasons why. Well, that also goes for just plain expansion. So what do we want from these places? Well, we want raw materials. Oh, also Hawaii. We want raw materials. We want resources. We want to sell things to these places. Now that we control the Philippines, why not sell them American products? Same with Puerto Rico, Guam, Hawaii. And we have new islands to put our navy. We talked already about how Hawaii will have numerous naval bases built on it because it's right in the middle of the Pacific. Well, now we have these other islands as well in Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines. Easy access to ports where our navy can stop, refuel, and such. So these are, again, our reasons why we want to use imperialism, why we want to expand. Just a quick reminder what we've talked about, because this is the economic impact of imperialism in general. With China and Japan, we force them to open up to trade, so they will become new markets to the United States to sell products to. We did that with the open door policy in China, saying that China is an open door. In Japan, of course, we opened them up and they industrialized and became very technologically advanced. In Panama, we forced Colombia to let Panama become its own country, and we were able to build the Panama Canal, which is going to enable us to move faster between our oceans, because now we literally have a man-made waterway that we can move through there, and we have a faster movement of our navy, of our trading ships, so on. And let's look at what happens to our navy. So in 1893, just 5 years before the Spanish-American War, before the U.S. starts expanding to all these new places, before we start using imperialism, America is only spending $33 million a year on their navy. By the time we get to 1909, several years after the Spanish-American War concludes, the U.S. spends $102 million more per year, 135 million total a year on the Navy, showing that we are really becoming a world power, that we are strong, and that we have taken all this new territory, and now we need to protect it and patrol it and show our power, as Alfred T. Mahan said, to get what we want in the world, to open up new markets, to protect our trade, so on, so on. So we've only talked about a few places, but America is going to expand its influence to all these places you see on the map. We talked about the Philippines, Guam, with the Spanish-American War. Hawaii we took from Queen Liliuokalani. Puerto Rico also from the Spanish-American War. The Panama Canal, which we built in 1903 after we helped Panama become independent from Colombia. So that's the Spanish-American War and its economic impact, as well as a quick little review on other places that the United States has expanded to and interfered with in the early 1900s, late 1800s. Hope you learned something today. Thanks, guys.